Right. Now, I think having set the terms and clarified the rationale for the course, let us move into one substantive theme of engagement in this course. And this theme of engagement relates to, item 1B of your 1B of your syllabus outline, which is paradigms and epistemologies of research, reframing the standard picture. I've also identified certain readings as part of this exercise, and my lecture is not a replay of the readings, etc. So my lecture is a reading by itself, if you care to see it that way, use my lecture as a kind of a foundation before you begin to make your lateral kind of moves through the readings that I'm trying to that I will be offering, and so on. So there are certain key terms, as that's my strategy. These are all part of PPT2. I have identified certain key terms: styles of research, standard picture, naive realism, social construction or constructionism or constructivist, transcending dualism, uniqueness fallacy, critical realist social science, and so on. So I will be, kind of hovering around these terms, key terms, and these key terms are not discrete entities. These are part of an unfolding structure of argument that I will be presenting in the course of these lectures, right? Okay. Now let me start with the first slide, which is called the standard picture of social scientific research, right? Most textbooks or research guides in social scientific research distinguish broadly between two styles of research. Okay. Or rather, different research guides, different textbooks invoke very different paradigms and epistemologies of research. For instance, there are two styles spoken of as qualitative style of doing research, social science research, and quantitative styles of doing research, or qualitative paradigms, quantitative paradigms, or qualitative epistemologies, quantitative epistemologies. Or some other textbooks will invoke the vocabulary of positivist approaches versus interpretivist approaches, right? People will talk about ethnographic research versus survey research. I mean, these are two styles of research, right? Etc. So most texts or research guides often in social science research contrast between two styles of research, broadly two styles of research, each invoking different paradigms and epistemologies of research, and so on, whether they be quantitative, qualitative, positivistic, interpretive, description versus description, or even description and prescription, right? I mean, prescriptive research versus descriptive research, and so on. Now, what is interesting and what is, I think, also important, okay, is that this distinction between two styles of research, in whatever way people characterize it, okay, is often invoked. This distinction is often invoked in very sharp terms, almost translating into a division, right? In fact, a lot of these research textbooks and research guides, in invoking a sharp distinction or a division between these two styles of research, bring in alternative vocabularies. They bring in oppositional terms such as objectivity, subjectivity, right? Analysis, narration, right? Reality, multiple reality, right? Explanation versus understanding, behaviorism versus culturalism, realism versus constructionism, right, and so on. Okay, okay, or scientific knowledge versus ordinary beliefs, and so on. So you find that this contrast between two styles of research not only contrasts between basic paradigms, even the associated vocabularies of these paradigms tend to be translated in oppositional terms, right? Okay. Of course, this tendency to dichotomize research along these lines is understandable, but I think it's also often very misleading to do so. And that's the point I'm going to raise constantly in the course of my lecture. I mean, that once you posit a division in these styles and contrast between opposing vocabularies, then you're also forcing people to choose between either or of these vocabularies and styles, right? Okay, etc. So the tendency to dichotomize the terms, while it is important in itself, it can also be misleading because it forces one to choose between one side or the other, and in the process we cannot capture the complexity of both the world and our ways of grasping it, right, etc. Okay, now I think it's important that this tendency to exclusivize one style over the other must be resisted, or to privilege one set of vocabularies of research over another opposing set of vocabularies of research has to be resisted. Okay, and because in a manner of speaking, it can translate this dichotomous way of looking at the world can translate into rather inadequate engagements with the world and our tools of analysis and so on. Okay, but I think the critical thrust of what I'm going to say in the context of the lecture on this theme is precisely this: that while we may contrast between styles of research, this contrast should not translate into a dualism of either or, right, etc. Right, and that if you have to choose either between one style over another, etc., then somewhere the nature of social inquiry and our engagements with the world can get compromised, right? And that's the critical thrust of what I'm going to say in the context of these lectures, which will also continue in the next class, and so on. But I think it's important. I mean, while I have given you some idea about what I'm going to say in by way of argumentative thrust, it's important to look at what this standard picture of social scientific research, invoking broadly two styles of research, or a contrast between two styles of research, implies, right? And for the purposes of my lecture, I'm going to present this contrasting styles of social science research in as neutral a language as possible, right? And I will be outlining the underlying philosophical position that underlies each of these styles, and then translating and then setting up a discussion in the context of this rendition of these two styles of research. So I think it's important that in addressing the problems and possibilities of social scientific inquiry, that we also engage with the standard picture that is often invoked in research guides or sociology research textbooks and so on, which often invokes two styles of research and so on. So I'm going to so instead of calling one style quantitative and another style qualitative, or one style positivist and another style interpretive, or any other nomenclature that one may choose, okay, I'm going to present these two styles in as neutral a language as possible, and therefore, okay, I will use. I will call one paradigm as paradigm A and another as paradigm B, right? In fact, that nomenclature, paradigm A, I mean, the nomenclature by itself doesn't disclose anything, right? Although its contents may disclose what the emphasis is, right? So also with paradigm B. And I think the neutral, I mean, if I have to retain the neutrality of the description of these two styles of research, then I think I need to classify them in as neutral a fashion as possible. So that's why I'm using this label paradigm A and paradigm B, right? Etc. Okay. Now, what I plan to do is to address the respective ontological and epistemological levels that are intrinsic to these two paradigms, which I'm calling paradigm A and paradigm B. I mean, you may call them in any other language you want, but as I said, given my choices, I'm trying to open out to a more critical discussion. So I begin with the construction of the standard picture in as neutral and full manner as possible. And so instead of using the language positivist versus non-positivist or interpretive, or using quantitative versus qualitative, or survey versus ethnography, or description versus prescription, etc., I will be using these more neutral label. Okay. In fact, I will also be stating these premises that underlie, these epistemological and ontological premises that underlie both these paradigms at some level of abstraction, therefore, right, etc. So let me move to the next slide, which is a broad construction of what I'm calling paradigm A, right? Now, broadly, okay, within the terms of paradigm A, the methodology of research is seen as grounded, both ontologically and epistemologically on the following set of assumptions, right? So paradigm A sees the methodology of research as grounded ontologically, okay, in the assumption, okay, that there is an objective reality, okay, and that this objective, I mean, there is a reality out there. It is independent of us, right? And there are certain laws or mechanisms that underlie that reality, and so on. So there are underlying mechanisms or laws that underlie the reality, okay? And epistemologically, you have the assumption that just as reality is independent, there is also an observer who observes reality. So there is a distinction made between the observer and the observed, right? Okay, and that this division or duality between the observer and the observed, okay, makes it possible for the observer to stand outside the arena of the observed, right, etc. So there is a reality out there, and I, as an observer, can observe it from outside as neutrally a manner as possible. I mean, that's the assumption in which paradigm A is constructed. And please note, I'm also rendering these paradigms in some kind of an ideal typical fashion. So there is something, extreme in the ways in which I'm rendering them, etc. Okay. In actual life, somebody might say, no, there is a mixture of many things, etc. But I think in trying to outline the elements of the standard picture and the limits of the standard picture, it's important to think about it in the fullest terms that is possible. In fact, if you have been a student of Weber used the methodology of ideal types to very, very substantive effect. And ideal types, he said, are always exaggerations of reality. An ideal type is never a real type. Right? An ideal type is not, as Weber called it, it's not a normative type, something desirable, and it's not a real type. It's a kind of an exaggerated. It exaggerates the features of reality, right? And then you use that exaggerated picture to measure actual reality. How much actual reality comes close to the ideal or not, right? Something of that same exercise is being attempted here when I say paradigm A ontologically conceives the methodology of research as believing in a world independent of us, that there is an objective reality and that there are underlying laws and mechanisms that have to be discovered if you have to understand the nature of that reality, and that epistemologically there is a clear distinction you can make between the observer and the observed. And this distinction, this dualism between the observer and the observed, makes it possible for the observer to stand outside the arena of the observed, right? Okay, so you find that, I mean, this is the strategy I'm going to adopt also with reference to paradigm B, that epistemologically and ontologically, there are certain assumptions that undergird these styles of research. Now, as we, I mean, you can clearly see that that within the paradigm A, the effort, right, is to get at things as they really are, right? Within paradigm A, the effort is to get at things as they really are. Okay, and that it is possible to get at things as they really are, right? So because the observer is clearly separated from the observed, the refining of the tools of inquiry can enable us to get a grasp of the things that are out there. Now that's why often paradigm A is associated with a naive, and I'm using this word naive realism advisedly. I'm using the word naive because please note, realism need not be naive, right? There can be non-naive forms of realism, but insofar as paradigm A works with these epistemological and ontological assumptions, there is a certain naive realism which can be attributed to paradigm A. That is, within this naive realism, the focus is on the way things really are or the way things really work, right, etc. So there is a world out there, and the whole effort of research is to get a sense of the world out there as it really is, or things as they really work, right? So in other words, such a naive realism, right? So realism is a claim that there is a world independent of us, okay? And there can be different forms of realism, but for our purposes, I think I'm only using this naive realism that I'm attributing to paradigm A, because if the claim of research is to find a way into way things really are or the way things really work, okay, then you can attribute a certain naive realism to paradigm A, right? Now, of course, I think it's important to point out, that this realism that underlies paradigm A is naive, okay, because it assumes a direct one-to-one relation, okay, between the objects in the world and the words or concepts which identify those objects, right? That there is a direct one-to-one correspondence between the world, objects in the world, and our representations of it. Our representations are always pictures. They are kind of photographs of the world, right? Etc. Okay, that our words and concepts, okay, mirror the world, right? That's why often such a naive realism is associated with the picture theory of truth, that our language mirrors the world, right? That our concepts and words that we use to describe the world, okay, actually reflect the world. So the world, I mean, that our representations are epiphenomenal, as it were. So there is a direct correspondence between the world and the language used to describe or account for it. And the whole task within paradigm A is to attempt a close fit between the world out there and our descriptions of it, or the language which we use to account for it, and so on, right? This is paradigm A, right? Are there any initial clarifications about paradigm A? Are there any clarifications? I mean, please, because please note the note I'm striking overlaps with some of the discussion that we have already had, right? Okay, but I think the vocabularies in which I'm presenting it is somewhat different, right? So I'm talking about the standard picture of social scientific research in terms of its underlying epistemological and ontological assumptions. And within one part of the standard picture, you have this idea, right, that there is a world independent of us, and that our challenge for us is how we can get our thoughts, our language, our theories to actually reflect the world. So there is a direct correspondence between the world and the language that is sought to be described. Yeah, there was because sometimes I miss out on these chat boxes, please. So, but I have noticed one question about paradigm. The word paradigm. What we mean by paradigm, Nikhil, is a broad framework, right? I mean, of course, the word paradigm is a very loaded word, etc. But I'm thinking about a paradigm as some kind of a framework or an approach to reality, right? So we are talking about a paradigm as some kind of a perspective or a framework of understanding that we bring to our activities of doing research. So when we are talking of paradigms of research, I'm talking about different ways of doing social science research, right? Etc. And I am, for purposes of this discussion, kind of abstracting from the many ways of doing research to translate into two paradigms of research, or two basic dominant frameworks of doing research, which I call as paradigms or epistemologies of research. Yeah.
You thank you, sir. You 12:48 p.m.
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. You have to be louder. Yes, Nikhil.
Sorry, sir. By mistake, I turned on the microphone.
Okay, it's fine.
I
Yeah.
got it, sir. I got it, sir.
Okay,
Thank
okay.
you,
No, if you start Googling paradigm, you will get a multiplicity of characterizations. I think what we are talking about is, and I'm also using the word paradigm. I mean, I'm using the label paradigm A and paradigm B because I don't want the label to to already kind of judge the question, right? Because the labels that we use.
Your microphone is on.
Sorry?
Your microphone is
sir.
on.
Sorry, sir. That is my talking software, sir. That is me.
Okay. Yeah. So what I'm saying is that I think it's important that a label can also be a form of characterizing something, right? Etc. Okay, and that's why that's why if you use the word positivism, right, somewhere along the way there is a discourse of both the defense of positivism and a negation of positivism that is already implied, right? That's why I didn't want to use that. I mean, I didn't want the label to convey a position, right? So I'm using the label in as neutral a fashion as possible, and then constructing something into that position that is meaningful. The reasons for doing so is because I want to anchor a more critical discussion on the standard picture and move beyond the standard picture, right? Okay, let me move quickly to paradigm B, and I think I'll stop after having spoken about paradigm B, right? Now, while paradigm A approaches the task of inquiry in the way that we have already formulated, there is a contrast, that paradigm B is striking, right? In fact, for paradigm B, what we call reality, okay, is not out there, right? Okay, so in fact, realities are multiple. They are objectively not out there, but they are constructed by people as they attempt to make sense of their world, right? So in other words, the world does not exist independently of the people's constructions about it, right? Etc. Okay. So the dualism between the observer and the observed, right? That paradigm A works with, okay, is in a sense repudiated by paradigm B, right? Etc. So reality is not out there, objectively existing independent of us. In fact, often reality is constructed by us as we try to make sense of the world, and so on. So clearly, within paradigm B, the perspective, we may call it constructivist, right? While a naive realism characterizes paradigm A in the way we have rendered it, right? A certain active constructionism or a active constructivist perspective underlies paradigm B, right? Okay, so you find that as part of this constructivist orientation, which we can read on an active constructionist position, constructivist or constructionist. I'm using those two words, synonymously. In a constructivist perspective or a constructionist position, the ontology that is invoked is often relativist, right? I mean that it's not just realist, it's also relativist. In that there is an idea that there are multiple realities, right? Okay, so there is a relativist ontology, okay, that a constructivist perspective is building itself on. I mean, it may say that all the realities are multiple and they're real, right? So it's not as though a realist ontology is being denied by constructivism. It only argues that this realist ontology is, in a manner of speaking, relativist as well, right? So the ontological perspective, often tied to a constructionist perspective, is, we may broadly call it, relativist rather than realist. And there is also epistemologically a focus which is more, which I have in the handout rendered it as monistic subjective, okay, rather than dualistic objectivistic, right? Objective epistemology, right? In the paradigm A, the epistemology is dualist and objectivist, whereas in paradigm B, the epistemology, we may call it monistic subjective, in the sense that it emanates from the people themselves, okay, and of course these words, monistic subjective and dualistic objective, I think these are loaded terms, okay, and I think they may need a lot of clarifying, but for the purposes of my presentation, what I mean by monistic subjective is that they emanate from the views that people have about the world, right? Okay, so the epistemological focus within paradigm B is, because it privileges our perspectives on the world, right, etc. There is something monistic and subjective about it, and whereas in paradigm A, because there is a dualism between the observer and the observed, the perspective tends to become dualistic and objective, right? So the claim accordingly, okay, but let me also just first let me just clarify the word dualistic objective, right? By dualistic objective epistemology, which we can trace back to paradigm A, is that the researcher is separate from that which is being researched. The observer and the observed are clearly separate, okay, and the beliefs and thoughts that and preconceptions of the researcher, okay, do not affect what is being researched. That's why it is dualistic, or at least seen as dualistic and objective, and so on, right? That things can be approached in their own terms, right? I mean, that's what a dualistic objective methodology is, or a dualistic objective epistemology is working with, that things as they really are can be apprehended and known, whereas a monistic subjective approach would be to argue that, look, things cannot be apprehended independent of our ways in which we make them known, right, etc. So you can clearly see within paradigm B, okay, the claim within paradigm B is that the process of inquiry, okay, involves a lot of active construction. That what is researched, the object, is created, often constructed and created rather than discovered, etc. Right? Okay. So the product of research which is conducted under paradigm B, okay, is not a set of conclusions or recommendations or value judgments, as in conventional methodology, but rather the product of research broadly outlined within the framework of paradigm B is if the findings of such a research actually become an agenda for negotiation, right? And for agenda for negotiation of the claims, concerns, and issues that involve the people themselves, right, etc. So you find that there is a different framing of the question of research and the possibilities of research in the framework of paradigm B as opposed to paradigm A, right? And I think broadly, if you are looking at the gamut of different styles of doing research in social science available, you can broadly subsume them under, or at least typically subsume them under either or of these styles, either paradigm A or paradigm B, right? So clearly a contrast is being struck between the claims and assertions of paradigm A and the claims and assumptions of paradigm B, right, etc. And in the next class, I will engage with the terms of this contrast and point out that many times this contrast translates into a dualism where you have to either choose between paradigm A or paradigm B, right? Or you look at the possibilities of one through the lens of the other, and so on. So I will raise certain critical remarks in the next class, and I don't think I want to take this on in today's class, but I have broadly rendered through basically two broad styles of doing research, and I have tried to render them in terms of their epistemological and ontological assumptions, right? Each of these styles of research have their possibility and plausibility, right? And but what is interesting is that often these two styles of research also translate into a contrast with each other, right? And I will contrast them in the next class, which will, and then move ahead in terms of my critical argument, which will be which hopefully in the next class I'll be able to complete, right? So are there any clarifications for the moment? I think the terms are set, and I've also given you some indication of where I'm headed, all right? But I think the critical engagement is not only what you're arguing, but also how you're setting it up, right, etc. So I think I'm as clear. I mean, I'm as interested in what one is arguing with these styles, and also how we go about making that argument. So that's why this setting up of paradigm A and paradigm B is part of a larger argument that I will be outlining as we go along, and I've given you already some indication of where we are headed. Are there any questions? Nikhil, of course, I mean, the assignment you can type it and send it to me. Send it through Google Classroom. Nikhil.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
No, please. I have clarified what this is.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There is if you don't mind, because I kind of get distracted. There is one more question from Raunak. could you explain what monistic form of epistemology implies one more time, if that's okay? Yes, certainly. Why do we call it monistic? We call it monistic because it springs from the minds of people, right? Etc. So since it is subjectivist, since it springs from the minds of people, right? The mind is seen to be, making everything up, right? So somewhere the world itself is a creation of the mind, right? Etc. So the label monistic comes up because somewhere along the way the mind is seen as constitutive of the world, right? So the kind of, the kind of, for instance, if I might use this mind-body question, in a monistic sense, yes, in a constructivist sense, the mind creates, right? No, but it would be much better if you ask these questions over the mic, Raunak, because I get distracted by these chat messages. I find this very uncomfortable, the chat messages.
I'm so sorry, sir.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to indicate is that see, when you're saying it is monistic, it springs from the minds of people, right? Okay, so that's why I called it monistic subjectivist, or monistic subjective rather than dualistic objective. Now, I agree that what is monism, what is dualism, these are large philosophical labels, right? Etc. But in a monistic framework, you are actually arguing that somewhere, the singularity of the mind is what constitutes reality, right? Etc. So of course we are talking of constructivism, as it were, and that's what you also indicate in your that the world is as we construct it. Yes, that's it.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. No, of course I will be complicating the terms of this picture as we move ahead, right? Please, this is just a setting up of the standard picture, right? I'm only setting up a standard picture, and then I will begin to unravel the elements of this picture and actually argue that there is something in paradigm A which paradigm B has to take seriously, just as there are issues in paradigm B that paradigm A has to take seriously. So in a manner of speaking, we are trying to transcend the dualism, right? Etc. and translate into a more adequate perspective on the world and so on. But please note, the discussion is posed in these abstract terms because it's deliberately done, right? We are looking at the epistemological assumptions, the ontological assumptions that underlie these styles of doing research. So the certain element of abstraction is built into the accounting, right? So, etc. But I agree that these words, monistic, dualistic, these are loaded terminologies. I agree, but I'm using them in a very, very simple-minded kind of a way. And I've already clarified that, in the handout, a dualistic objective would mean that, look, there is a dualism made between the observer and the observed, that the world exists independent of the observer. Whereas in a monistic perspective, the world is not independent of the observer. The observer is the one who constitutes the world, as it were. So the world does not exist independent of the observation, as it were, right? And there is some, I think there is an element of truth in both. And I think that's going to be the critical crux of what I'm going to say in the coming classes. Right? Any other questions? Okay, so let me just stop the recording.